On a cold afternoon, the small yet charming city of Grayville became the setting for an unforgettable story. The city carried a stark contrast between the modernity of towering buildings and the timeless charm of family-owned shops. Yet beneath its tranquil facade, simmering tensions lay hidden, waiting to erupt. Margaret Carter, an elegant woman who had just turned 70, stepped out of her favorite cafe after a leisurely afternoon. With a composed demeanor, she made her way toward her car, unaware that the next few minutes would completely alter her peaceful day. Margaret was the mother of Nathan Carter, Grayville's chief of police, but she preferred a simple lifestyle, avoiding any influence her son's prominence might have on how others treated her. Walking along the cobblestone path, two police officers, Blake and Thomas, suddenly approached her. Their patrol car stopped abruptly beside her, blocking her way. The way they looked at Margaret made her uneasy. Ma'am," Officer Blake began in a stern tone. "We need to ask you a few questions." Margaret turned toward them, trying to remain calm, though her eyes betrayed her confusion. "Is there a problem, officers?" she asked politely. Blake exchanged a glance with Thomas, who stepped closer. "We've received reports of suspicious activity in this area. We need to search you," Thomas said, his tone devoid of any softness. Margaret frowned. "A suspicious activity? I just left the cafe. Is there a specific reason you believe I'm involved?" Blake crossed his arms, his gaze sharp. "Are you refusing to be searched?" he asked, his tone challenging. Margaret tried to explain, but her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Before she could say more, Thomas moved toward her with handcuffs. "Turn around," he ordered. "Search me? But I haven't done anything wrong," Margaret exclaimed, disbelief written all over her face. Yet, she knew resistance would only worsen the situation. Swallowing her pride, Margaret allowed them to cuff her and search her. Every item in her handbag and every pocket of her coat was inspected as though they were searching for evidence of a crime that didn't exist. Bystanders merely watched in silence, none daring to intervene. Margaret felt humiliation rising within her, but she maintained her composed exterior. "I want to call my son," she said firmly. Blake sneered, his demeanor dripping with mockery. "Oh, and who's your son? Go ahead. Call him. We'd love to know." Margaret didn't respond. She quietly retrieved her phone. After 2 rings, a deep, authoritative voice answered. "Mother, what's wrong?" It was Nathan Carter. From her tone, he immediately sensed something was amiss. "They're searching me," Margaret said, her eyes briefly meeting those of the 2 officers, who now appeared slightly uneasy. Nathan's reply was succinct. "Where are you?" "The corner of Olive and Maple, near the cafe," she responded. Nathan's voice grew cold, barely concealing his anger. "I'll be there in 5 minutes," he said before ending the call. Relief mingled with anxiety washed over Margaret. She knew her son would handle the situation, but she also worried about the fallout. Meanwhile, Blake and Thomas stood there, trying to maintain their composure, though the arrogance in their eyes had noticeably faded. In the distance, the wail of a police siren echoed, signaling that this incident was far from over. Grayville was about to face a lesson in justice and the consequences of prejudice. Margaret stood upright, a surge of strength rising within her as she realized her son was on his way. Though she trusted Nathan to resolve the situation, the sting of humiliation from being treated unfairly still burned in her heart. In the distance, a black SUV sped toward them, coming to an abrupt halt. The door swung open, and Nathan Carter stepped out, his tall, commanding figure clad in the uniform of a police commissioner. His eyes blazed with anger as he strode purposefully toward the scene. Officers Blake and Thomas stiffened immediately, recognizing the man before them. "Commissioner Carter," Blake stammered, stepping forward as if to explain. But Nathan's cold glare silenced him instantly. "Step aside," Nathan commanded, his voice icy and authoritative. The 2 officers retreated, their earlier confidence vanishing. Nathan approached his mother, his expression softening as he checked to ensure she was unharmed. "Are you all right, Mom?" he asked gently. Margaret nodded, though the shame of the incident still burned in her chest. I'm fine, she replied, her gaze flickering toward the two officers now standing rigid. But this is unacceptable. Nathan's face hardened once more as he turned to face Blake and Thomas. You two. His voice was low but sharp. Explain yourselves. Blake nervously glanced at Thomas, who remained silent. We received a report of suspicious activity in the area. Sir. She matched the description. Blake stammered. Nathan's eyes narrowed. His gaze icy. Matched the description of what? Was she resisting? Did she threaten you? And no, sir. Thomas muttered, his voice barely audible. The once busy street had fallen silent. Everyone was now focused on the unfolding drama. Nathan stepped closer, his voice colder than ever. And then why did you feel the need to harass her? Was it because she's black? Is that the only reason you found her suspicious? Blake's voice quivered as he attempted to respond. Sir. We were just following procedure. Nathan let out a humorless laugh, his eyes sharp as daggers. Your procedure is flawed, and you're about to be held accountable for it. Without breaking eye contact, Nathan pulled out his phone and called Internal Affairs. His tone was calm but resolute. I want an immediate investigation into Officers Blake and Thomas. They are to be suspended until further notice. Blake's face turned pale. Sir. We didn't mean to, he began. But Nathan cut him off with a sharp look. Didn't mean to what? Didn't mean to harass my mother? Didn't mean to treat her as if she didn't deserve respect? Or didn't mean to get caught? Thomas, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke, his voice trembling. It was a mistake. Sir, we were just doing our job. A mistake? Nathan raised an eyebrow, his tone dripping with sarcasm. A mistake like this could have far worse consequences. And you think that's an excuse? The bystanders murmured quietly among themselves, too intimidated to intervene. The tension hung thick in the air, ready to burst. When the officers from Internal Affairs arrived, Blake and Thomas were pulled aside for questioning. Their earlier arrogance had completely dissolved, replaced by fear and regret. Margaret stood beside Nathan, watching the scene with a mixture of relief and sadness. She had done nothing wrong, yet she had been judged solely by the color of her skin. While justice had been served, the scars of the ordeal would linger. Nathan turned to his mother, his gaze softening once again. I'm sorry you had to go through this, he said quietly. It won't happen again. Margaret offered a faint smile. Thank you for coming, she said. I didn't know what else to do. You did the right thing, Nathan reassured her, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. And now, they'll face the consequences. They walked away from the scene, leaving behind a crowd still buzzing with whispers. That day, the city of Grayville learned an important lesson. No one, not even the police, is above the law.